My brother told the cops I wrecked the bike he stole, and my parents backed his story. I showed proof. He lost his job. Now my mom's sobbing. He's your brother. Let him stay. I told her, I'm done being the family doormat. My name is Ethan Monroe. I'm 33 years old, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina, where I work as a marine engineer. That basically means I spend most of my time around ships, designing, fixing, inspecting. It's a good job, stable, quiet, and a little isolating, which is probably why I've always felt obligated to keep tabs on my younger brother, Caleb. Caleb is 27, and calling him a screw-up would be putting it mildly. He's a walking mess of failed dreams and unpaid debts, but somehow he always manages to land on his feet, or more accurately, in someone else's wallet, usually mine. Over the years, I've bailed Caleb out more times than I can count. I paid off his student loans because he swore he'd change his life. I gave him 10 grand for a wellness startup that barely lasted 6 months. And just a few weeks ago, I handed over the keys to my vintage Triumph motorcycle, a beautiful, customer-stored piece I'd been working on for years. He was supposed to just take it around the block. Instead, he took off on what he called a soul-healing cross-country retreat. No warning, no permission, just a note on the counter that said, borrowing the bike for a bit. Don't freak out. I need this. Like I was a goddamn rental service. When I finally reached him, he answered the phone from somewhere in Arizona. I asked him what the hell he was thinking, and he said, and I quote, "Relax, man. It's not like you were using it." His voice was light, smug, like I was the one being unreasonable. I felt something crack in me then, not like a dramatic shatter, more like a slow, inevitable fracture that had been forming for years. Caleb had always been reckless, but this felt different. This felt like a final straw. I tried talking to our parents about it, but of course, they brushed it off. My mom, Irene, said, "He's just trying to find himself. Let him breathe." My dad, Leonard, offered the usual half-hearted sigh and said, "You know Caleb. He'll come around." No one in my family ever held Caleb accountable. He was the golden child, the one they worried about, the one who got all the second chances. Meanwhile, I was the one who paid the bills, fixed the messes, and kept the peace. For a long time, I thought that was just how family worked. The responsible one carries the weight so the others don't crumble. But lately, I've started to wonder if maybe I wasn't helping. Maybe I was enabling. That night, after the phone call, I walked into the garage and looked at the empty spot where my bike had been. It was stupid. It's just a machine. But seeing that empty space hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't about the bike. It was about everything it represented. Caleb hadn't just taken something I loved. He had taken it like he was entitled to it. Like my things, my time, my money, my life were just tools for him to use whenever he felt like it. And for the first time, I didn't just feel tired. I felt done. That was the moment I knew. This time, when the fallout came, I wasn't going to catch him. It was just after 3 in the morning when my phone rang. I was dead asleep. The kind of sleep that comes only after a day so frustrating you crash out from mental exhaustion. The screen lit up with Caleb's name, and for a split second, I thought about letting it ring. But something in my gut told me to answer. "Ethan," he said before I could say anything. His voice was shaky, off. "Don't freak out, okay? Just hear me out first." I was already sitting up, heart pounding. "What happened?" He exhaled hard, like he'd been holding his breath. "I wrecked the bike." The words hit me like a punch in the chest. "What?" "It wasn't my fault," he said quickly. "This deer came out of nowhere, and I swerved. And then the front tire hit gravel and I'm fine. A little bruised, but nothing serious. I'm in Nevada, near a town called Ely. The bike's not drivable, like, at all." There was a long pause as I processed what he just said. I rubbed my face, trying to keep my voice calm. "Are you in a hospital?" No, I didn't need that. A ranger stopped by and called a tow truck. The bike's at a local garage now. Look, that's not even the issue. The thing is, I need a favor. I should have hung up right then. "What kind of favor?" He hesitated. "So the cops asked me if I was the owner. I told them I was riding with my brother, and that you just stepped away when they arrived. That way, it wouldn't look like I stole the bike. You know? Keeps everything clean for the insurance." It took me a second to understand what he was really asking. "You told the cops I was with you?" I said, slowly. "And now you want me to back that up?" "Yeah, man. Just say it was a joint trip, like a brother bonding thing. If they call, say you were there. It's no big deal. The insurance might cover repairs if there's no negligence, and I just figured." "No," I said, flatly. There was silence on the other end. "No," he repeated, like it was a foreign concept. "You took my bike without asking," I said. "You lied about where you were going, and now you want me to lie to the police and insurance?" "Absolutely not. Come on," he snapped. "It's not that deep. It's just a story. You're not going to get in trouble." "That's not the point, Caleb." My voice rose despite myself. "You made your choices. Now deal with the consequences." He didn't respond at first. I could hear his breath quicken. "You're really going to do this to me?" he said, suddenly angry. "You're seriously going to leave me out here to take the fall? After everything I've been through?" I let out a bitter laugh. "What exactly have you been through, Caleb? You mean the retreat you treated yourself to with my motorcycle? The startup you blew my savings on? The loans I paid off for you while you ghosted your creditors? Which part am I supposed to feel bad about?" "You don't get it," he growled. "You've never gotten it. You've always had your life together, your job, your house, your steady little world. I've been struggling, drowning, and all I ever needed was someone in my corner. But you," his voice cracked, sharp with rage, "you're abandoning me. In my darkest hour. Don't you dare," I said quietly. "Don't you dare spin this like I'm the villain." There was a pause, then a venom-laced, "Fine, you want to play it that way? Don't call me when you need help, 'cause next time, I won't be there." "Good," I said, and I hung up before I could second-guess myself. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long time after that. My chest felt tight, like I just stepped into unfamiliar air. I expected to feel guilty, that gnawing, heavy shame I'd always carried after our fights. But it didn't come this time. This time, I just felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that meant something inside me had finally reached its limit. Caleb had wrecked my bike. But more than that, he crossed a line I couldn't ignore anymore. And I knew, deep in my bones, this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I didn't sleep after the call. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling while the minutes crawled by. I kept replaying everything Caleb said, over and over, like some cruel recording stuck on loop. "You're abandoning me in my darkest hour." What a joke. At 7:15, my phone lit up again. This time it was a text from Mom. "We need to talk about what happened with Caleb. Call me ASAP." Followed by a voicemail from Dad. I didn't listen to it. Then another from Mom. "He's your brother, Ethan. He needed you, and you turned your back on him." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I turned it off and dropped the phone on my nightstand. I already knew how this would go. It was the same routine. Every time Caleb got himself in trouble, he made the mess, and I became the broom. An hour later, I was trying to force myself to eat something, dry toast and cold coffee, when someone pounded on my door. 3 sharp knocks, the kind that say, "I'm not leaving until you answer." I opened it to find Dad standing there, in a windbreaker and khakis, holding a folded newspaper under his arm like he was on some kind of mission. "We're going to the hospital," he said, pushing past me before I could speak. "What?" "Caleb's in bad shape. Not critical, but bruised. He could have died out there. Ethan, we need to show up for him." "I already talked to him," I said, shutting the door behind us. "He's fine. He's not in the hospital. He didn't even go." Dad turned, eyes narrowing. "That's not the point. He's hurting. Emotionally. And your mother, and I don't understand why you're choosing now, of all times, to act like this." I let out a bitter laugh. "To act like what?" "Like someone who's finally sick of being used." "Don't start," he warned. "No. Let's start," I said, crossing my arms. "Let's talk about how many times I've bailed him out, how I paid off his loans, how I funded his failed business, how I gave him my motorcycle, and he wrecked it halfway across the country without even asking." "He needed to get away," Dad said. "He needed therapy," I snapped. "Not a goddamn joyride." There was a beat of silence. Then Dad sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "You always have to make everything about you," he muttered. I stared at him, stunned. "About me?" "Yeah. Like Caleb hasn't had it hard. Like you're the only one who's ever made sacrifices." "I've made sacrifices for him," I said through gritted teeth. "For you, for Mom, for this whole damn family. And not once, have any of you acknowledged it." Dad shook his head, like I was speaking a language he couldn't understand. "This attitude of yours? It's why we can't come together when it counts. You're selfish." That word hit me harder than it should have. Selfish. After everything I'd done, after all the money I'd spent, the time I'd given, the crap I'd swallowed for years. "You want to call me selfish?" I said, stepping forward. "Fine, but let's be real, Dad. You've been making excuses for Caleb since he was 16. He can lie, steal, disappear for months, and you still pat him on the back like he's some misunderstood genius. Meanwhile, I show up, I fix everything, and I get treated like a disappointment because I expect a little respect." Dad's jaw tightened. "He's your brother, and I'm your son," I said, quieter now. "Or did you forget?" He stared at me, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, something would shift, that he'd say I was right, that he'd apologize, that he'd recognize me, finally, as more than just the guy who pays the bills. But instead, he said, "If you won't help Caleb, you're no longer part of this family." I froze. The words hung in the air like smoke. He said it so casually, so plainly, like it wasn't a big deal, like cutting me out was just another option on the table. I nodded slowly. "Good to know." Then I opened the door. "You can go now." "Don't be dramatic," he said, but his feet didn't move. "Go," I repeated, louder. He stared at me for another beat, then turned and walked out. I didn't watch him leave. I just shut the door and locked it behind him. I stood there for a long time, staring at the wood grain of the door, feeling the silence fill every corner of my apartment. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the family doormat anymore. Not for Caleb, not for my parents, not for anyone. They wanted to treat me like I didn't belong? Fine. I was done pretending I did. 2 days passed with no word from Caleb. No calls, no texts, just silence. I told myself that was a good thing, that maybe he was finally realizing I wasn't playing his game anymore. I even let myself hope, for one brief second, that this whole thing was dying down. Then the cops showed up. It was a Thursday afternoon. I had just come back from a job inspection, mud on my boots, clipboard still in my hand, when 2 uniformed officers knocked on my door. "Ethan Monroe?" the taller one asked, checking a small notepad. "Yes," I said, trying to stay calm. "We need you to come down to the station and answer a few questions about an incident involving a motorcycle crash in Ely, Nevada." I blinked. "Wait, what?" The other officer chimed in. "It'll be informal for now. Just a few questions." They weren't aggressive, but they weren't exactly casual either. I asked if I could grab my phone and wallet. They said yes. So I followed them out, locked the door behind me, and tried not to panic on the ride over. At the station, a detective met me in a plain room with flickering lights and an ugly metal table. He introduced himself, Detective Rios, and sat across from me, flipping through a manila folder. "We received a statement from a Caleb Monroe," he said, without looking up. "Your brother." I nodded slowly. "What did he say?" "He claims the motorcycle involved in the Ely crash belonged to you, and that you were the one operating it while under the influence. He said you fled the scene before authorities arrived." My jaw dropped. He said what? Rios looked up then, studying my face. "He also said the bike was in your name, which checks out. You registered it last spring. You want to explain how your brother ended up on it then?" I stared at him for a moment, too stunned to speak. But then I pulled my phone out of my pocket and placed it on the table. "Can I show you something?" He gave a small nod. I opened my text messages and scrolled straight to the thread with Caleb. The note he left, the string of messages I'd sent asking where he was, the voice memo he sent gushing about the open road and how transformative this retreat was going to be. I slid the phone across the table. He took the bike without permission. I didn't even know he was going until I found his note. He called me the night of the crash and tried to get me to lie for him. When I refused, he flipped. Rios took his time scrolling. His eyes narrowed at certain parts. He played the voice memo out loud, just enough for Caleb's carefree, stone-sounding drawl to come through. "Okay," he said finally, setting the phone down. "That doesn't match the statement we received from him." "No kidding," I said. "He's making it up because I wouldn't cover for him." Rios sat back in his chair. "Did you know your parents backed up his version of events?" That one hit me in the chest. I sat forward. "Wait, they what?" "They both gave verbal confirmations that you and Caleb were taking the bike cross-country together," Rios said, flipping to a new page in the folder. "They said you've been under a lot of stress lately, and that maybe you were unstable." My mouth went dry. "That's not true," I said, fist clenched. "None of that is true." Rios tapped his pen on the folder, watching me carefully. "Well, the thing is, Mr. Monroe, people lie. But not everyone comes in with this much documentation. Most guilty people don't walk in the door with receipts and text proving they're innocent." I met his gaze. "So what now?" "Now." He gave a tired half-smile. "Now I'm going to take this phone, make a copy of the messages, and talk to your brother again. See if his story changes when we show him the evidence." I leaned back in the chair, the adrenaline starting to drain from my body. My hands were still shaking. Rio stood, gathering the folder. "We may need you again, depending on where this goes. But if I were your brother, I'd start getting nervous." He walked out, leaving me alone in the room for a while. I sat there in that hard plastic chair, trying to breathe, trying to understand how my own brother, my parents, could do this. Accuse me, lie to the police, just to avoid accountability. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel shocked, just numb, because deep down, I knew they were always capable of this. I had just never let myself see it. When the detective came back, he handed me my phone and a small slip of paper with his direct number on it. "Call me if you get anything new from Caleb," he said. "Or your parents." I nodded, still feeling like I was floating a few inches outside my own skin. I'd never been inside a police station before, never sat in one of those rooms, never had my own family accuse me of a crime. I walked out into the afternoon light, blinking like I'd just stepped off a plane. The world felt louder, harsher. My head was still spinning as I climbed into my truck. I sat there for a while, just gripping the steering wheel, letting the silence wrap around me. I brought evidence. I had the texts, the timestamps, the voicemails. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but still, some part of me kept expecting the ground to open up, for Caleb to pull one more rabbit out of his lying hat. Then something clicked. Why the hell was I waiting for the next blow? Why was I still sitting there, bracing for him to take another swing? He'd accused me of a crime. He got Mom and Dad to back him. This wasn't a spat. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intentional and dangerous. That was when I made the decision. I turned the truck around and headed right back to the station. Detective Rios looked up from his desk when I walked in. "Everything okay?" "I want to press charges," I said. My voice didn't shake. "For theft and false reporting." He blinked, surprised. "You sure about that?" I nodded. "He stole my motorcycle, then tried to pin the crash on me. Lied to the police. Lied to insurance. And my parents backed him up. I'm done protecting him." Rios studied me for a long second. Then he gave a slow nod. "All right." He pulled out a fresh report form and started writing. "We'll open a formal case. It'll go into the system as theft and filing a false report. If we determine intent to defraud insurance, that's another layer." He looked up again. "You may want to consider a restraining order, just in case." That hadn't even occurred to me. I hesitated. "Do you think I need one?" "I think anyone who gets falsely accused of a felony by their own brother should at least think about it," he said. "Some people get desperate when they lose control." I filled out the paperwork. It took maybe 30 minutes. By the time I left, a quiet shift had happened inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't covering for Caleb. I wasn't excusing him. I wasn't explaining him. I was holding him accountable. And just like that, the dynamic changed. No more tiptoeing. No more guilt. Just facts and consequences. When I got back home, I sat on the couch and stared at my phone. No new messages. No calls. Not yet. But I knew it was coming. And this time, I was ready. It started with a LinkedIn update. A friend from college messaged me, "Hey, isn't Caleb your brother?" Just saw he's marked as suspended pending investigation at Source Nest. Everything okay? I didn't even have to check. I already knew what it meant. Apparently, once the police report was filed, it made its way fast and loud. Caleb had been working at a mid-tier tech firm in San Francisco. Remote role, mostly fluff work, but it gave him enough of a salary to pretend he was doing something with his life. Apparently, HR didn't take kindly to criminal allegations tied to false insurance claims. 2 days later, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. HR@srcnst.com. Hi, Ethan. We're conducting an internal review related to a legal matter involving Caleb Monroe. Given the report you filed, would you be willing to confirm the incident involving the motorcycle? Your statement will remain on record as part of our due diligence. I didn't hesitate. I told them the truth. I included screenshots. I attached the voice memo. I explained everything, clearly and factually. No venom, no drama. The next morning, I got a single follow-up. Thanks for your time. This aligns with what we've received from local authorities. We appreciate your help. That was it. No fanfare. No thunderclap. Just a quiet email with the power to burn Caleb's house of cards down. By the end of the week, he was fired. The voicemail came in at 1:43 a.m. Hope you're happy, Caleb snarled. His voice was rough. The kind of rasp that comes from too many beers and not enough sleep. You couldn't just let it go. You couldn't let me explain. You ruined my life, Ethan. I didn't listen to the whole thing. Just hit delete. There were more the next day. One where he cried. One where he shouted. One where he tried to sound calm, like a hostage negotiator trying to reason with a bomb. And then came the fifth call. I picked up, not out of compassion, but curiosity. Ethan, he said, breathless. Listen, can we just talk? Not about the job. Not about any of that. Just you and me, as brothers. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry. Okay? I messed up. I was under a lot of pressure. I didn't think you'd take it this far. But we can fix this. You can fix this. There it was. The turn. The manipulation. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding, he continued. You can tell HR you were emotional. They'll listen to you. You're the responsible one, right? You always are. Come on, Ethan. Don't let this be how it ends. I brought the phone closer to my mouth. Caleb, I said quietly, this ended a long time ago. Then I hung up. No yelling. No lecture. No long-winded speech about boundaries or growth. Just a dial tone. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like freedom. It was a Sunday afternoon when they showed up. I was halfway through folding laundry, watching a documentary on shipwreck salvage, when I heard the knock. Not a polite one, an urgent, repetitive pounding. I already knew who it was. I opened the door, and there they stood. My mother, dressed in a pressed floral blouse and too much perfume. My father behind her, arms folded, jaw tight like he'd rehearsed this speech in the car. They didn't even say hello. Mom stepped in first. We need to talk about Caleb. I didn't move to let them in. We've already talked. We're not leaving until we do. Dad said flatly, his eyes locking with mine. That old cold look. Disappointment masked his authority. I stepped back with a sigh. Fine. 5 minutes. They came in like they owned the place, just like always. My mother went straight to the living room and sat down like it was her own couch. Dad remained standing, arms crossed, like he was prepared for a standoff. He's lost everything, Ethan, Mom began. Her voice was soft, rehearsed, the kind of tone she used when she wanted something. His job, his apartment. He's been sleeping at a friend's place in Oakland. He's running out of options. Then maybe you should have thought about that before he accused me of a felony, I said. That was a mistake, she said quickly. He panicked. You know Caleb. He acts without thinking. That's not an excuse. No, Dad cut in, his voice sharper. It's not, but you don't punish family like this. I raised an eyebrow. Punish? You filed a police report, he snapped. You went in his employer. I told the truth. You destroyed his life. No, I said, standing my ground. He did that. I just stopped covering it up. Silence. Mom leaned forward, hands clasped. He needs a place to stay. No. Ethan, she pleaded. You have the space. You have the stability. You can help him get back on his feet. No. Her eyes watered. He's your brother. And I'm your son. I said again, quieter this time. But you never seem to care what that means. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I've always been there, I continued. I paid his debts. I fixed his messes. I bought him time while he burned bridges. And now that I finally drew a line, suddenly I'm the bad guy. He's family, Dad said, stepping forward. And if you won't help him, maybe you're not. There it was. The ultimatum. I stared at him for a long moment. I felt a part of me, a younger part, wanting to crack under it, to give in, to buy peace for another month with one more sacrifice. But I didn't. You've said that before, I said quietly. When I wouldn't go to the hospital, when I wouldn't lie for him. And every time, you've made it clear, I only count when I'm cleaning up someone else's mess. Dad's mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. I'm not responsible for Caleb anymore. And I'm done pretending this is a family when it's just a guilt trap. Don't do this, Mom whispered, her voice shaking. Please, Ethan. He has nowhere else to go. Then maybe he'll finally learn something, I said. Because as long as someone's always catching him, he'll never stop falling. They didn't move at first. Then, slowly, Mom stood. She wiped under her eyes but didn't look at me. Dad followed her out, pausing at the door. You're making a mistake, he said. I met his gaze. No, I'm finally fixing one. Then I closed the door. I leaned against it, waiting for the guilt to come crashing in. But all I felt was stillness, cold, quiet, and peace. Leaving town, You got what you wanted. Hope you sleep at night. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I locked my phone and set it face down on the counter. No part of me believed that message was written out of genuine closure. It was a weapon, a last-ditch effort to slip the knife in with guilt as the blade. But for once, it didn't cut the way it used to. I didn't text back. I didn't ask where he was going. I didn't even wonder. I just stood there in the kitchen, letting the silence fill the apartment. For the first time in years, the family group chat was dead quiet. No check-ins. No guilt-laced messages from mom. No sarcastic, "How nice of you to finally respond," comments from dad. No passive-aggressive memes from Caleb. Just silence. And it felt strange. Not peaceful, not joyful, but still like a calm lake after a long, violent storm. Not happy, but still. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, staring out at the Charleston harbor. I'd lived there for nearly 7 years and never once watched the water without some part of my mind being occupied. A Caleb problem to fix, a loan to cover, a phone call to return before mom left another guilt trip on voicemail. But that night, I had nothing pulling at me, no one waiting on me, no one depending on me, and it was both terrifying and freeing. I thought I'd feel regret, that maybe I'd wonder if I'd gone too far. Maybe I'd stare at my phone, half hoping Caleb would try again, that this time it would be real, that this time he'd say something honest. But instead, I felt empty, not broken, not bitter, just empty in a way that made room for something else. I stayed out there for a while, just listening to the hum of the city below, the gulls over the water, the creak of boat lines tugging against the docks. Then I went inside and made myself a real dinner. Not takeout, not cereal. A proper meal: salmon, rice, vegetables. I poured a glass of wine. I put on music. I sat at the table and ate like I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring. And that's when I realized, silence doesn't always mean loneliness. Sometimes, silence is just the sound of finally being left alone. I moved to Portland 3 weeks later. New job, new apartment, new number. I didn't tell anyone from home. Not mom, not dad, and especially not Caleb. I needed the distance, not just the miles, but the space to become someone outside of who I had to be back there. The marine tech startup I joined was fast-paced but smart, and the work made me feel like myself again. Like the guy I used to be before my life revolved around cleaning up after someone else's mistakes. The apartment was smaller than the one in Charleston, but it felt bigger, cleaner. There were no memories baked into the walls. No ghost of Caleb slouched on my couch. No echo of my parents' disappointment hanging over my furniture. Just me. For the first time, just me. And then, one rainy Tuesday night, there was a knock. I was in sweatpants, halfway through making dinner. I paused, spatula in hand, staring at the door. No one knew I was here. Another knock. Not angry, not rushed, just patient. I opened the door. Caleb. He looked like hell. Hair longer than usual. Clothes rumpled. A backpack slung over one shoulder. There was no smug grin. No forced charm. Just tired eyes. "Hey," he said, voice quiet. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "I'm not here for money," he added quickly, like he'd rehearsed it. "I'm not here to stay. I found out where you moved. Took me a while. I just needed to see you." I stood frozen. Part of me wanted to slam the door. Another part wanted to demand how he found me. But mostly, I just waited. He shifted on his feet. "You were right," he said. "About everything." Still, I said nothing. I lost everything. The job, the apartment. Mom and dad won't even answer my calls anymore. He let out a dry laugh. "Guess I burned through them too." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. My chest felt tight, but not with anger. Not even pity. It was something else. Like standing at the edge of a cliff you've already jumped from once. "I'm not asking for a place to sleep," he said. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I swear. He paused, looked down at his shoes. "I miss my brother." That hit harder than anything else he could have said. He looked up. "I know I don't deserve to ask. And I know you probably can't trust a word I say. But I'm not here for a favor. I'm just here." I let the silence stretch between us. The hallway light flickered overhead. His face looked older than it should have. Like life had finally started to hit back. "I don't hate you," I said finally. He looked up, surprised. "But I don't trust you either. I get that. And I don't know if I'll ever let you back into my life. Not fully." He nodded slowly. I figured. I exhaled through my nose. "You have somewhere to stay tonight?" "Yeah," he said. "I got a room at a hostel. Cheap place near the bridge." "Good." We stood there a few more seconds. He looked like he wanted to say more, to ask if this was some kind of progress, if this meant something was starting to shift. But I didn't give him that. "Not yet. Take care of yourself," I said. He gave a tired, hopeful smile. "You too, man." And then he turned and walked back into the rain. A week passed. No new texts. No calls. No knocks at the door. I half expected another surprise visit. Another Hail Mary apology. Another carefully crafted sob story. But Caleb stayed quiet. Still, the night he showed up stuck with me. It hung in the corners of my thoughts, not as pain, not even as guilt, but as a question I didn't know how to answer. What if he really meant it this time? The problem was, I'd asked myself that question too many times before, and every time, I'd answered it wrong. So when he finally did text, a short message, just, "Can we talk?" I told him to come by the next evening. He arrived around 7. Same tired look, but this time, a little cleaner, more put together. He didn't bring a bag, just himself. I let him in, sat him down at the kitchen table. I poured us both a glass of water. Not wine, not coffee. Something simple, unemotional. He didn't start with excuses. didn't dive into apologies. I've been going to meetings, he said quietly. AA, and therapy, too. I had to borrow money from someone I didn't want to. Got clean, got honest, started trying. I nodded but didn't say anything. I know it's too late. I know I wrecked everything with you. He shook his head, like the words were impossible. I'm trying to figure out who I am without you fixing everything. I let that sit for a minute. Then I leaned forward, folded my hands on the table, and said, I'm glad you're trying. He looked up quickly, like he wasn't expecting that. But I need you to hear this, I continued. You hurt me, bad. You didn't just make mistakes, you made them, then handed me the fallout and walked away. For years. And when I finally said no, you tried to ruin me. He swallowed hard. I know. No, Caleb, I said firmly. I don't think you do. You turned our parents against me. You lied to the police. You accused me of stealing my own motorcycle. That wasn't just reckless. That was cruel. He nodded slowly. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. I'm not saying this to punish you, I said. I'm saying this because if you ever want to be a real brother again, you need to understand what you did. All of it. His voice was low, hoarse. So, where does that leave us? I took a breath. It leaves you out of my life. He looked up. His mouth opened. But I held up my hand. I'm not saying that out of hate, I said. I'm saying it because I've spent my whole life sacrificing my peace to keep you from crashing. And it didn't make you better. It made you worse. He looked down at the table. I could see the tears welling in his eyes. But he didn't let them fall. You need to learn how to stand on your own, I said gently. Not because I don't love you, but because I do. And because I finally love myself enough to stop setting myself on fire to keep you warm. He nodded. Just once. And for the first time in our lives, he didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just stood up, slowly, and said, thank you for everything, even this. I walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, the way people do when they know they're stepping into something final. Take care of yourself, I said. You too. Then he left, and I didn't watch him go. I closed the door, locked it, and turned back to my life. It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like survival and peace, for real this time.